we get started here? So by way of a sort of initial introduction, so I'm Ben. I'm one of the co-founders of Memrise, and I'm very excited to have so many of you here with us today. This is an incredibly exciting moment for me personally, as well as I believe for the whole kind of education world. And the reason I think that is that we're at this moment where AI has made a whole lot of stuff possible. It's quite fundamentally changed the way that we can go about learning. That's why I think it's important for the whole education world, and it's exciting for me because I spent best part of 15 years building at the forefront of what's possible with technology around AI, using AI a lot, and this breakthrough finally really allows me to realize the vision of what I wanted to build in the first place. So thank you very much for coming. We want this to be more of a discussion than just a preaching session. And really at the heart of it is that we at Memrise have been working at the forefront of AI for a long time. And we've built a bunch of pieces of product, of features that are deeply rooted in the pedagogy that we believe in about how to learn languages effectively. But what we really want to do is now connect with teachers, with people who are working at the forefront in the classroom, in order to adapt what we've built, these features, so that they can have maximum impact in the classroom. And that's why we want this to be a conversation. We want this also to be an ongoing conversation. So actually, I'll put a link in the chat, or Emma and Flora, could you drop a link into the chat, which links to join a Google group, which will just essentially is a mailing list, which is just a closed group that we're going to take forward from this webinar. So it's a small group of people who want to be involved in helping us shape how these tools can be applied in schools. And so by being part of that, you'll get first access to new things that we build, and you'll have a direct feedback line into us. So that'll be a bit of a discussion group, taking this forward out beyond this webinar. So yeah, there's the link in the chat, so you can sign up to that. So representing on the panel here, I'm holding the space for the kind of deep tech and product side. And I'm joined here by two people deeply experienced in the classroom side of language learning. So just to introduce quickly my fellow panelists here, let's start with Myllis. Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, so I'm Myllis. I'm the digital strategy lead at King Edward VI School, Shakespeare School, Stratford and Avon. And what I do is, in addition to being a French and English teacher, I basically help develop our teaching and learning for digital policy, so how we can use digital resources better to improve educational outcomes. And I also work with a variety of apps and software programs in order to see how we can make those better suited to what schools can do. I'm really interested in how apps like Memrise can really open up the classroom, and they can really change what's possible and what can be brought into a classroom. And that's what I'll be talking about later on.
Awesome, thank you, Myllis. And King Edward School, of course, sits right at the top of the league tables at the moment, doesn't it? So it's very, very high performing. And Marcus, how about you?
Yes, sorry. So I'm Marcus Reoch. I've been teaching Mandarin for 15, 16 years, both at secondary and primary level. I've got a bit of a kind of unique twist on this in that I was a language graduate. I did French and Spanish, but found I really wasn't using them in the jobs I was involved in, mainly in journalism. And I learned Mandarin at age 28 out in Shanghai and got engaged out there and came back and, really wanted to go back into journalism, but just got slightly distracted by the possibility of actually kind of dispelling the myth that Mandarin was this impossible language, which I kept on hearing. So what started as a little bit of an entrepreneurial attempt has kind of turned into a mission, which has, I think, been very successful in getting children to enjoy Mandarin, but also continue to a very high level. And I'd love to be able to share some of my methods with you today.
Well, and Marcus, that's also the company that you built there, Dragon Learning, through that, it's not just your work as a teacher, but you've influenced many schools as well. Is that?
Yes, absolutely. We've taught Mandarin in over 800 schools, either on curriculum or enrichment or after school. So yeah, it's been a very solid delivery of Mandarin to all schools.
Amazing. So I've just seen Kat has got a question. I need my microphone to be muted. Your microphone is muted. Don't worry, we'll only turn you on if you want to ask a question later on, Kat. So no stress on that. Awesome. So that's who we are on the panel. We're going to start. I'm just going to give you a little bit more background into the general AI and language learning and the approach that we've taken to it at Memrise and why. Then I'll pass over. Myllis will talk a bit about what she's seeing about what is possible in schools now. And then Marcus will do a bit of a case study with Mandarin about how this can be applied. And then we'd like to open it up. That should take about the first half of the call. And then the second half, we really want to open this up to discussion, questions, suggestions about how we can make this work as well as possible. So first part, what we've been doing in AI and why it's important in language learning. So I'll tell you a bit about my longer term background because it bears on what we're talking about here today. And then we'll jump into the meat of the discussion. So in my teens, which is worryingly long time ago, I got very into neural networks, studying neural networks, building neural networks. I got into them because I wanted to try and predict the results of horse races. Slightly embarrassing reason. I never actually got very good at that. But I got interested in enough in the process of how they work and how they spot patterns within information that I went on to study neuroscience at Oxford. And there I got very interested in human memory, how we model memory, but actually how the human brain generally learns. And I got specifically interested in how we learn languages. And I got into it because I'd always kind of struggled with it. And I'd done fine in my exams, but I knew I didn't speak any French. I knew that if I went to France, when I went to France, I just couldn't talk a word. And I had this narrative that I was bad at languages. And through my study there at Oxford, I got to this kind of core insight that, in fact, in a kind of optimal language learning journey, is probably only about 20% about the learning part and about 80% about effective practice. And I got great teaching on the learn part of it in my school years, but I just had nowhere near enough exposure to the practice part. And so I came up with this hypothesis that really this was the problem and that actually I wasn't bad at languages. And so I then moved to China to see if I could learn Chinese if I was really just focusing on the practice part. And actually very much like Marcus, I chose it. Well, I chose Chinese because I thought it was hard by reputation. In fact, after I'd spent a year or two there, very much like Marcus, I came back wanting to proselytize that Chinese is actually a very simple language in many respects. But anyway, it turned out that I could. If I was practicing a lot, even I, who thought I was really bad at languages, could effectively learn a language, could run a business in Chinese within a year or so. I spent a few years in and out of China, starting businesses, doing various things, and then returned back to England and founded Memrise about 13 years ago. And the key thing that we wanted to do then was to create ways for people to practice languages effectively without having to be in the country. So the learn part is still important and helpful, but the really big thing we wanted to bring was this effective practice without being in the country, give you that magic that learning magic that you get when you're actually there, surrounded by people. It's been a long journey. It's been 13 years of building and iterating. We have reached 70 odd million people learning on Memrise now, so we've reached a lot of people. We have created some great experiences over the years. We've been building chat-based conversation interfaces for 7-8 years, but it's always been a bit limited. And what shifted was when was the release of GPT-3. And we started building on GPT-3 2.5 years ago. But even then, although we could see it was a big breakthrough, it still wasn't quite there. And it took quite a lot of difficult work to make it work at all. And it was still a bit too clunky. And really, it was about this time last year that we got the breakthrough to create the first conversational AI. Anyway, I'll go into that a little bit more detail in a moment. I think that the technology, the fundamental point is that we have crossed this important line where technology, where artificial intelligence is capable both of producing language that is very, very similar to a human conversation, which gives you this opportunity to practice when you don't have a human in front of you. AI has also got immeasurably better at listening to what you're saying and understanding it and turning that into the words, written words. And the combination of those two things, because we've had Siri, we've had voice input for a while, but Whisper AI is just an order of magnitude more accurate, and particularly in the case, or more powerful, particularly in the case where people aren't speaking the language very well. You really need to get that high quality technology to be able to do it. So those are the two breakthroughs we've had. The AI can have a conversation and answer back to you like a human, and it can also take your voice input and turn that into a conversation, into text, so that you can converse with the machine. So the two big things that we've built with this, one is a conversation practice piece. So we've created a bot that you can speak to and have a human-like conversation with. We've built it on top of the ChatGPT-like exchange technology, sort of chat technology. Well, and we've got the voice recognition built in there. We've also, there's another kind of crucial piece that you need to weave into that, is that you need to make it fun to do. Just having a conversation with a computer isn't very compelling because it's not a person. You're not going to get anything from it. You just don't really care. So we have to set this up as a game and create ways to make it fun to try and persuade the computer to do something. So in one of them, you have to persuade the computer, you have to persuade the bot who is playing a car salesman to sell you a car for under $500, for example. So it becomes a kind of, you're using the language to get to a completion rather than just, am I accurate? Am I correctly translating that phrase? So that's the first thing, this conversational AI. The second bit is finding video content. So in terms of practicing understanding a language, which is essential if you're going to get towards fluency, there are billions of hours of video content out there in most languages that people are learning. That's great potential practice material. The problem is, until you're quite upper intermediate, that's all straight over your head. So you can't use it to be a useful resource. But what the AI technology of being able to get very accurate transcripts at almost zero cost, what that lets us do, or that unlocks for us, is the ability to take any video content anywhere on the internet, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and we can work out what words and phrases you need to know to understand that video. And what that means is that if we know what words and phrases you've learned, then we can recommend to you these videos are at your level. And even if you've only learned 10, 15, 20, 30 words, we can find things on TikTok where they only use 8 words. You know the whole thing. And we can find that authentic native speaker video content that is already out in the world at a scale that no company could ever hope to match, that level of content creation. And we can find that, match it to your level, and show it to you. So these are the two big AI pieces that I want to look at. And as I say, we've been building different versions of this for 13 years. Now is a step change of difference. The last 6 months, it has all changed. These pieces have really come to a level of maturity that means they are just compelling, exciting experiences. And that's why we're getting this huge wave of excitement and interest around those products that we built. So my focus is very much on the pedagogy and on the product and the detail of the user experience there from the learner perspective. what I'd love to hear about from all of you, and first from Myllis and Marcus, is about how we can link this up in the classroom to solve the problems that you all face in the classroom. I know I've heard about needing to pass oral exams, how we can help train for that. But I really want to open this up and just understand all of the places that we can tie this into the curriculum, to the way the classroom works. So that's actually all from me. I will, unless there are any questions right now, let me check. There aren't. So I will pass over to Myllis to talk a bit about how you see this being applied right now in your experience.
Thanks, Ben. That's really interesting. And the first thing I want to pick up on from what you've said is the focus that you can have on speaking and listening. Because in a classroom, these are probably the two things, particularly speaking first, that you aren't able to practice on a regular basis. And this is what I mean about AI having opened up the classroom. Because if we think about what a languages classroom looked like maybe only 10 years ago, and at lots of classrooms now, we've just got textbooks, exercise books, with then a few sort of relatively basic sort of web applications being used as kind of gap fills and those kind of things. And that's quite 2D. But when we bring into the mix the advances we've had since COVID, so the number of classrooms that now will have Google Classroom or that will now have Teams, and are now setting homeworks that can involve digital resources, we can see how the world of apps, which before has been something that students have used perhaps on their own, in private, away from the teacher, is something that can suddenly become part of an entire curated learning system for a language. And then when we pair that with the fact that increasingly schools are moving towards one-to-one devices or bring your own device, those kind of things, or in classrooms are opening up to the use of mobile phones in lessons, even tiny things like bringing in headphones, then we can see that the world of language learning is in a completely different place to where it was just a few years ago. Now, I've said before that I'm a French teacher, and if you go to France and you study a language, it's not called modern foreign languages, they're called langues vivantes, living languages. And this is what AI and this new generation of app-based content is able to do. It's actually putting life into languages. And the sense of having authentic content isn't something that you're sort of as a teacher saying, well, go away and research this, go away and watch this, find videos on this, here's a playlist that you sort of had to bodge together yourself. We're suddenly able to have curated lists and also generated content and generated questions and resources that are coming from this. We've had for quite a few years now. I can remember, I sat my A-levels in 2011. I can remember listening to the radio. I can remember having dictionaries. I can remember having those sorts of apps on my very first iPod Touch. But now we've got integrated systems that are able to recommend those things, that are able to assess your level. And suddenly you've got an element of personalized content, which is the panacea to me thinking of my teacher's hat on, to the fact that languages are a subject where students are stretched out, where the differentiation needs are really, really high, because you have some students who simply don't have the grammatical tools or the vocabulary to access certain tasks, and you've got other students who are burning through them. And for many students, they're sort of slowed down by the process of lessons, because in their own time, they're on Netflix and they're watching a huge amount of language content. And suddenly now we're able to find this kind of this middle ground, this really nice sort of liminal space between the private apps and language learning and the things that are going on that's almost enrichment, and then suddenly having this social element of the classroom where you can combine those two things. And I think that's a really, really exciting space for language apps. And if I sort of move away from the sort of more philosophical things about how you can use something like the Membot and go into the more concrete, if I think about the sorts of classroom activities where you could use the Membot, I'm thinking of the classic teacher activity when you're practicing for an oral exam. You've got your GCSE role play, or you've got your A-level debate card, and you're able to have those kind of quite sort of scripted scenarios. You have to order a coffee, you have to say there's a problem with the coffee, you have to ask for a refund, something like that. It's exactly the sort of scenario that can go into a Membot style activity, and the two students can, they can each one can give a line in response, they can check their response, they can see the corrections, and suddenly an activity that might have worked best for your two highest achieving students in the group is suddenly relevant for every single person. So you've got that native speaker sort of quality resource, but available to every single person. And that's before we get away from the fact that simply being able to practice without a native speaker is hugely liberating for schools, where we've got access to a language assistant, is something that might only happen at A level, perhaps for 20 minutes a week. And what do lower school students get? What do students in year 7 to 9, or in year 6 or year 5, what do they have in terms of access to native speakers? And the answer is probably very little. And if we dwell on those younger students for a second and think about how on earth they might access native speaker content at the age when that they most need it. If you have students who are able to listen to native content at a young age, their accent will be better. I mean, it's something that I've noticed, that the students who I teach now have a much better ear by the time they get to A level, simply because they've been watching Netflix for quite some time. Even in the space of my teaching from 2016, that's been quite a substantial rise. So if you can have that going right from the get-go, you've got better native content from the beginning, and that's that's hugely helpful.
Could I ask, Myllis, in your mind, how much of this is about creating activities that the children can do or the students can do during lessons, during homework, and it's kind of an activity for them? And how much would you be looking to be able to also get assessment from the tool? If it were just people spending hours watching videos at their level and having conversations, is that enough? Or do you want the program, or how important would it be to have the software also making subjective judgments about their skill level?
Well, I think the huge benefit of AI is that it's allowing for a sort of form of continuous assessment without the student being aware of it. I mean, this is one of the real advantages of apps that can sort of track and monitor which sort of mistakes students are making. You see there's various sort of programs that are coming out now which are able to identify the patterns in what a student gets wrong. So you can have quite a light touch analysis of what a student's doing. And that's really helpful without the student getting that test anxiety that they would get if you had said, we're going to have a past tense test today, and they panic in the moment and then forget all their irregular verb endings, those kinds of things. I think practice and assessment. I think the practice is that you've said this before, the sense that 80% of learning comes from having those opportunities to practice it, and this changes what you're able to do in homework tasks, because obviously you've got the situation where a student who struggles will perhaps access 2 or 3 of the questions that you give them and will get the rest wrong and won't understand why. And then that intervention that the teacher gives is when the homework is marked, which might be some days later, by which time the student has already got in their head that they can't do it, and you've already created a kind of mental block. But if you've got the instant feedback coming from an app that can drill down and again can generate more of those kinds of questions so they understand that before they move on to the next one, I think that's great. On the flip side, for your student who's a superb linguist and has understood that present tense, well, you can push them a little bit further as well. Rather than giving a homework task of 10 questions, you can give a homework period of half an hour of content that best fits them. I think that's the sort of solution that you can move towards, which would be really helpful to give a really strong sense of differentiation.
Right, but and so that seems to me that it's more important to you to get the differentiated and tailored experience. The assessment is useful in that it allows a differentiated learning experience, but ultimately that's the real key thing that you're looking for. And then the results will fall out the end of that, rather than.
Yeah. I think it's the difference between weighing the pig and feeding the pig. I think this is what we're trying to do. Constantly weighing the pig won't make it fatter. What we're trying to do. Yeah.
I hadn't heard that metaphor before.
So if we think about what else is possible, the sorts of we were already seeing in this world of one-to-one devices that we have we have online textbooks and things, and that we have online quizzes. So there's various sort of programs where the teacher has something on screen, and then the students will have phones and things that they can use as sort of like answer pads, like TV game show style. And again, these are changing the ways that teachers and students can interact with content. And of course, if you have something like Memrise, where you can have sort of short, sharp bursts of native content, it's enabling a different kind of interaction, as opposed to the classic, here's a listening test, here's all these questions. It's quite a stressful moment, when you've got the teacher playing perhaps a 2-minute clip and you've got to write things down. It's that stress inducing to a heart racing.
It's a really unfortunate fact that stress is bad for memory.
Yes.
And so what we want is people to practice talking, practice understanding, but the more stress they're under when they start doing that, the less likely they are to be successful. So doing it in a low stress environment. And actually we did a study with the Membot that even with a friendly tutor, the difference between talking to the bot and talking to a friendly tutor, there's a reduction in stress level, but I think it was 45%. It was a huge, huge drop.
Exactly. I mean, I've been talking with a student this week who was finding just the speaking class really hard. And she spent a little bit of time on Membot and said, this is really good because it takes away that element of stress. And then it makes her more confident when she does come to speak, because she's had those little moments where she can pre-plan the response, because the benefit of Membot is you don't hold the microphone down when you're ready, when you've translated it. Yeah. It's little things like that extra little moment of thinking time, as opposed to those awkward silences of thinking someone's judging you. And that's making your ability to get the words out even more difficult. And it's the same for listening, because if we've got one-to-one devices, you've got a pair who have a headphone in each, they can play something a couple of times and say, what was that word? No, it's this, it's not that, it's that. Spell it, write it out phonetically, and then they can get it. And suddenly a listening task has always been in the past something that's quite individual. It's a scary part of the lesson because no one can help you. And then suddenly you've changed the nature of that task. You've opened it up, you've taken the stress out of it. And it makes language learning a more communal experience, which at the end of the day,
it's what language is.
It's what languages are. And that's what too few students are able to see when they learn in quite a 2D way. And this changes the role of what an educator can do, because if you've taken away the role of the teacher as simply the correction, the correction robot at the front, who you speak and they just keep correcting you, you've outsourced that in lots of the tasks to a member. It means that the teacher is the person who's sharing that lived experience of a language, because they've had their year abroad, they've experienced it, that it opens it up. Yep. And that makes a teacher less threatening, more of a guide, an accompanist for language learning, rather than the instructor, corrector, sort of that creates a barrier. And I don't think that's as helpful.
That's not really, I don't think that necessarily works for any subjects, but it's particularly not right in languages, I think. I'm conscious of time here, Myllis, so I'm going to pass over to Marcus, because I know, Marcus, you've got some a kind of worked example to take us through of Mandarin. And maybe just while you're setting that up, I'll see if I can answer a couple of these. Sure, no, I'll pass straight over to you, Marcus, and then we'll get to the questions afterwards.
Great. Thank you very much, Myllis, for that. A lot of things I agree hugely with. I think what we've seen pre-pandemic was the focus on teaching in the classroom, and then some bad habits that had crept in over the ages, where homework was taken out of the classroom. And what we've noticed with Mandarin, but also with other languages, is that actually there's a greater focus now on two parts: is great teaching with a Western pedagogy for shorter periods of time, especially if it's online, because children really do nod off very quickly online. And then the second part is a really strong asynchronous learning part, which is curated and linked to what has been taught in the lesson. Now, one of my favorite parts, I've really got to say, with Mandarin is demystifying it. And I set myself a task. I did this on Dragon's Den, actually, 3 minutes to explain Mandarin, because I think it's really important you've got a bit of context before I kind of dig into the detail about how I use Memrise to link in with my teaching. So the most important thing is to remember is that children love hearing themselves at the early age. We hate it when we're older. We kind of cringe. There are 4 tones in Chinese, and there's this kind of urban myth out there. I don't know, Ben, whether you had this experience, that if you say the wrong tone, you can't be heard. There are 4 tones. The first one sounds a little bit like you're singing ma. The next one, as if you're climbing a ladder. We call it the Donald Trump tone because it's one of surprise when he says something, ma. The next one is a tiger, which is like a growl, ma. And then the last one is pain. Now, children absolutely love this. And teachers that we've employed have really kind of glossed over this. They also find particularly funny that some of these tones can mean kind of different things, and you can be rude by mistake. For example, ma means mum and ma means horse. So eventually you could be saying hello to a horse instead of to your mum. Now, what's really important is to think of things like, is to talk about pinyin. Pinyin was introduced by the Politburo, the Chinese government, back in the late 60s to deal with illiteracy in the countryside. And it's a real game changer in terms of great teaching of Mandarin in the classroom. For example, ni hao, I'm sure we've all heard of that, but ni means you and hao means good. And you put them together, you have ni hao, which means you good. And you always see children kind of go, oh, God, that makes sense. This isn't hard. And you'll notice that we focus very much on phonetics in the early stages. But that said, characters are not impossible. Children are, especially mathematicians and scientists, they see them as meccano or building blocks. And this is fascinating that this is a woman. You need to look at this very differently. Dyslexic children find this fascinating. This is a woman crossing her arms and protecting her child. And if you put the woman with the child, it is a good thing. And then you have man, which is built up of field, power, and certainly not suitable for 2023 teaching, but it's true that in the old days, the majority of farmers were male. And then king is this, and then you put a king in a box and it's his kingdom. The last thing which is really important that Memrise does so brilliantly, which I'm going to go on to now, is don't forget about culture. And it's something we tell teachers and constantly. They assume that it should be a language masterclass, but if you don't talk about culture, you're not going to retain students' interest. So the unlucky number in Chinese is 4. It really is the kind of granddaddy of bad. And 4 is se, but death is se. So, I've been on a plane from Beijing to Seoul and seat 44 was empty. They take it really seriously. And kids seem to be obsessed with the negative, unfortunately. They find this really very funny, but it kind of retains their interest. 8 is ba, and to rake in the dough is fa cai. So at Chinese New Year, they say gong xi fa cai, and children find that fantastic. So the kind of exam question here is, how do you take joined up Western pedagogy, great teaching, out of the classroom and keep children's and students and schools' interest for the long term? And I was really desperate for an asynchronous online learning platform which would complement my face-to-face teaching to allow this to happen. And I asked students, language teachers, what were the commonalities? What were the things they were looking for? They were looking for fun and engagement, which Myllis mentioned, interactive, modern pedagogy, easy to follow, step by step, so scaffolded and supported, and then student metrics. It's really important that students are rewarded on the way. Otherwise, there's really no call to action. So there are 3 elements I wanted to just quickly look at in terms of Memrise's product, which I feel are very strong. It's that personalized learning, which comes with a lot of humor, hence my awful cat meme. I'm sorry, but I was looking for a better one, Ben. I know you could do better. But it's this creative and individual learning path for students, which really differs from many other things out there. And then it's the fact that students access like building blocks, what they've learned. They can mark off what they know, what they don't know, and then just for proof of a point there, you can go and see the different parts, and then you can mark what you know, mark what you don't know, and then Memrise works out iteratively what language to retest you on. But my students really benefit from having their own language review area. Myllis talked about kind of anxiety, nervousness about learning, and it's so important that students can feel comfortable, albeit with a language, a language bot initially, albeit with them looking at a rather passive way of learning building blocks, at least they're progressing at their own speed. And that's really important. Now, this is one thing I feel really that Memrise does very, very well. I've always found when I've watched and trained teachers, and when I've taught, there's that kind of settle stir thing where you teach and then children get restless. They need something, they need the variation so that a lesson doesn't come predictable. And video does that in spades. And when I put on a YouTube video, it's kind of almost, oh great, this is the bit I've really looked forward to. Especially, it has a special purpose if you're mixing in the language that they've learned that lesson or in that particular unit. So what Memrise does is it sources age-appropriate and trending videos, and they're fun, they're humorous, they're in tune with the modern world, and that is really important that children feel they're learning something which is trending. They're taskmasters, unfortunately, students nowadays. They're demanding a lot more than ever. And my students are interested in seeing how the words that they have learned kind of map into popular culture. And what Memrise does, it allows them to study Chinese words and characters, because there really is no point from a pedagogical point of view, them learning the same words again and again when they know it. I think this is the game changer, if I'm honest, is Memrise's ability to map in AI into the learning process. It has been received hugely positively in the classroom. It's what we call the communicate part of the website. Why has this been such an important part? I think, again, it's taking what they've learned and now getting them to be able to see real time in an unanxious environment in their own space to practice. So it basically shortens the gap, increases the gap between when they still feel they need to practice before they actually go and speak to a real person in what Ben calls the alive environment. I think children being asked to do oral exams is particularly challenging, mainly because they learn in a class environment and they're suddenly asked to speak to someone on a one-to-one basis in a small room.
It's a really different context, isn't it?
It's always been the same, isn't it? Where it's that small, tiny room in the language department that no one really uses. And teachers have always been surprised about why that hasn't really worked. The communicate area really does help. Students can use Chinese characters, phonetics. I've tried to show you in that magical 3 minutes, the separation there and how good teaching gets that across. I thought it would be really good to see a working example of this from a Mandarin perspective. I asked students about this and all of them seem to be interested in ordering Coke or coffee, etc. I'm in Beijing, I want to order a coffee. Some said wanted to be a McDonald's. I noticed you didn't have that one, Ben. We should work on that. So
cool feedback.
Ordering coffee.
早上好，你想喝什么咖啡？
So the language bot is asking what kind of coffee the student would like.
早上好，你想喝什么咖啡？
The student can hear it again. The student can see the translation. The student can reply in English. If they're not feeling that confident, the student can reply in phonetics, or the student can reply in using Chinese characters. This is where I obviously embarrass myself massively, and Ben has to come to my rescue. Hopefully not. So I've asked for some coffee with some milk. Okay.
你要加糖吗？我可以知道您的订单名称吗？
And they want to know, do I want sugar with that? And also they want to know my name. You know how these coffee places are so nosy nowadays. They want to know your name. I'm always kind of surprised by that, but I've got used to it over time. Again, I don't know how to say, I don't know how to reply, but maybe I do. But I do know how to reply. And I'm going to use the magical hint, the magical microphone function. This is where it will all go wrong, Ben. I'll do my best, okay? 我不要糖，我叫 Max. And then I submit.
太棒了。
Okay.
给 Max 一杯加牛奶不加糖的咖啡，
So you completed it.
马上就来。
It does work. The reason I call myself Max is that in China, when I call myself Marcus, they always call me Max. Yeah, so I've given up with that one. So just on to the last bit is how does Memrise help my students? And I think the first thing, which is really important to talk about, is a positive and varied learning environment. So often language learning has failed because there's go and do your homework or go and learn this PDF of Chinese characters, or that the asynchronous, the piece of work they do is not working across all the levels and abilities of those students. Memrise allows that to happen really cleverly. So it's that structured learn, immerse, and communicate piece, which is really important to create this interactive experience, which is not so far off the teaching, the chalk and talk part of the lesson. I actually asked teachers about this, and this came back, which I wasn't surprised about, but a lot mentioned that it was safe, and that it's easy to use with a browser view. So often external providers presume that downloading an app or downloading some software on a school network will be fine because lots of other schools are using it. Due to GDPR and all the other challenges out there now, schools are particularly nervous, and if you don't get IT on side, you haven't got anywhere. And IT in schools is challenging. Become friends very quickly. And then the last 2 points really is, it's a concept it's not rocket science, but it's a concept we developed called Connect. And it's this whole idea of no more than 30 minutes of real-time chalk and talk teaching, and then 30 minutes of curated, memorized study in this case, linked to that teaching. It's a really effective pedagogy and way to approach. And it means that it replaces this old style homework and becomes a relearn now, but we're going to show you how you're doing. And my question to Ben at some stage would be, will teachers be able to see how those students are doing as a pool, as a group, find out the commonality of mistakes, commonality of successes. Really important in terms of what tasks and objectives the teacher sets henceforth. The last bit, and again, Myllis talked a lot about this, is this anxiety piece. And I have a real world example with my daughter who's 13, who's studying Chinese, and she had an oral examination earlier this week and was absolutely dreading it. We've talked about this. It is, how do you reduce that anxiety by giving children control of the narrative, so that when they come to have that oral examination, either at GCSE or early, that they don't feel that they are set to fail. And my question, which came back to me from a few teachers, sorry Ben, the exam question was, will students be able to insert their own questions into the communicate area?
Questions in what sense?
In terms of if the student wanted to perhaps go into wanted to go and order some bubble tea, and in Taipei, and the student set the environment and typed in certain questions, which then asked her to
So
answer.
there are two different ways that we can do that. I mean, we can very quickly generate more situations. It needs a little bit of testing, but actually the AI is getting better and better at testing itself. So we set up the AI to test whether it's set up a good conversation. So we can generate, hundreds, thousands more situations. The reason we haven't done that at the moment, chief reason, is as soon as you create 1,000 different situations, you create the requirement to have a good search feature on that. And right now, that just is extra work that we don't need. But it's absolutely, if we understand what are the situations that people most want to have, and that most work for teachers in schools, we can create a lot of them very quickly. Then there's a further situation of, do we open it up so that people can create their own situations? Again, it's possible, they're probably a little further off, because I think we probably want to create 10,000 situations ourselves before, which would probably then cover pretty much anything that a student might want to do, rather than trying to create the tools to allow students to make their own ones, because then we're going to spend a lot of time stopping students creating unsuitable content. And I think it's probably easier for us to cover the 99% use case by creating tens of thousands of situations ourselves, than it is to spend a lot of time trying to do nuanced moderation. That's my gut feel, but that's definitely pending further discussion.
I guess you could also look in the future at, I'm just thinking about, again, my A-level students, and a classic part of most A-level exam courses is an individual research project. So you have like a presentation, a 2-minute presentation, and then the examiner asks you questions about it. You know, something along the lines of, you can paste in your presentation and say, ask me 5 questions about this. So those sorts of things. That
100% we could.
Yeah.
Yes, that we can certainly do much more easily, or rather, I don't see any problem with that at all. We could make that. I will note that down as a suggestion. So just jumping now to the questions. We took a little longer than planned there, but awesome to hear that.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
My
That's my
passion got
time.
in the way.
Actually, I think it was. I think I got us. I talked for too long at the start. Okay, so Kat Carrington, what age is the bot designed for? We've been working collaboratively with our primary feeder schools and would love for them to have access to. So at the moment, it's not designed with a particular age group in mind. That is to say, it's designed for a normal, in fact, we have not constrained it to any particular age group. We would love to understand how we should constrain it beyond difficulty for younger age groups. So it's certainly something we could do if that's the right place for this to be used. If it's the area where we can have most positive impact, then we can certainly do that. We have not done it thus far, or not done it specifically. That to say, we have constrained it so it doesn't say offensive things. It doesn't go, you know, there's all of the sort of safety aspect of it that yes, we have done, but we haven't specifically stopped it. I don't know what further constraints we'd want for primary school students. I would love to get your input, Kat, on what you think those would be, or indeed anyone else's input on how we should be thinking about constraining it for primary school students. Then, got it. Okay. I'll work through the next one. Marcus, Myllis, can you see these questions as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to look at the next one down and then be planning an answer to that, and you know, kick the discussion further down so that we can get to as many as possible? So I'll take Blake. So Blake, I'm curious how this technology could potentially increase learning traction for dead languages like Latin, Koine Greek, Ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, etc. Yeah, so it's a super interesting one. I think it's interesting because fundamentally the way that we learn and teach dead languages just has this absence of practice. Like you can't get any. If you listen to Stephen Krashen, says that the only way to gain an ability in a foreign language is to process target language content at just above your current level. Well, what do you do for Latin? You don't get to process target language content being spoken at you, so your brain doesn't get a chance to do that. So we have to fall back on other methods. So it certainly is theoretically possible. A difficulty that we would have is for the immerse element, so for the video element, we just have a paucity of video content. The bot, probably we could get to work it in Latin, get it to work in Latin. I think that we would need to train more models to get it to work in Ancient Hebrew Aramaic and so on. I just don't think there has been enough training of the large language models on those languages. So I think that that's where we would need to work on it. It's certainly theoretically possible, and it will come. It just will take a little time. Next one, Myllis, do you want to do that? And then Marcus, do you want to take Diana's question?
Yeah.
So I think absolutely it's possible to create a sort of AI teacher, in the sense that I think what you're getting at there is you're having a kind of personalized route through. So you would have certain exercises that you respond to in one way, and then that sort of takes you down different routes. And again, examples of corrected grammar and language patterns, that's what the Membot is able to do, certainly at the correcting grammar. And then presumably in future updates and things, it wouldn't be, I'm guessing, Ben, too much of a stretch for it then to notice patterns in what the student is getting wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that the big point of this is the relevant links to video, audio, reading. This is what the immerse section is already able to do, and I'd say that's the single biggest difference between an app like Memrise and other sorts of courses you get, which are just playlists that are just moving from one thing onto the next. Recommendation is quite an easy way to move forward, and also recommendation based on your ability level as well. And that's, again, a huge advantage that an app like Memrise has. So I would assume that's actually a pretty...
So in a sense, I mean, Memrise is right now kind of an AI teacher, spread across those three areas, but a teacher that helps you mainly with the practice area. I think the bit that we will always struggle to replicate of a live teacher is reading the body language, reading the confusion, the furrowed brow, and knowing, like, okay, hold on, that person needs a bit more explanation. Oh, my explanation hasn't landed. Can I try it again? So there, I don't, and I think that those things are very much harder for AI to solve. But I think those are largely within that learn phase. Has the student understood me? I think within the practice phase, we can do a huge amount there.
I think there as well, it's the difference between an AI tutor and an AI teacher. An AI teacher, I would say, is, for all the reasons you said, Ben, that's very, very hard to do. A tutor working alongside a main teacher, I think that's much more possible. Yeah.
Amazing. Marcus, do you want to?
Yeah, Diana, listen, I absolutely. Your question is we're focusing on listening and speaking, as these are the really hard skills. I think that's so true, because what we've seen, again, with Mandarin as an example, if we focus on speaking and listening rather than transliteration and getting kids to be able to write the same Chinese characters at the same time as speaking, it's such ploddy progress, and the likelihood, without any flag waving and metrics, without them having that, the likelihood of them wanting to carry on with that language is hugely reduced. I mean, the ultimate goal of learning a language is to be able to communicate effectively with others. Listening and speaking skills are crucial for understanding others, expressing oneself in conversations. And if you develop these skills, you can engage in meaningful interactions and build connections with native speakers of the language. I think there's also, sorry, Ben.
Yeah, 100%. That's where we're coming from. It's also, so I think it's both the most important part that we can help with, because it's the most motivating. It's that moment when I remember when I was studying Chinese, I had this first moment where I was sitting with my language partner and she was talking and I was just understanding when she was speaking. It was just like magic. And that moment where you're kind of connecting with another person is the thing that's very, very difficult to do if you're not surrounded by native speakers. But it's also the bit where AI changes the game. In reading, we've been able to analyze texts and recommend you text at the right level for ages. That technology's been there. But it still requires a particular kind of highly motivated student to engage with it. Whereas this this just changes the game for the audio speaking and listening.
Yeah, I think it saves teachers huge amounts of time. I know that teachers looking for videos which are safe and that haven't been doctored, by someone with swearing, etc. It's really time consuming for teachers. I think it's the practicality piece. In most real life situations, such as traveling or conducting business in a foreign language, it's the listening and speaking skills which are most frequently used, and those skills enable you to kind of navigate various everyday situations, like asking for information, giving directions, negotiating, and engaging in discussions.
Awesome. And then I've got Daniel Zimmerman. So does Memrise help non-native English speakers in corporates learn business English? So actually something that we haven't quite touched on here is the way that Memrise approaches course structure. So we're very consciously not in the business of creating syllabuses and curriculums. I think there's plenty of great work done on that, but the way we look at it is that we want people to be able to learn the language to do whatever it is that they want to do. And as one example, if you want to watch this film in French, you want to watch La Haine, we can create a course that gives you all the words, phrases, chunks of language, grammar that you need in order to watch that film. And that's what the Immerse tool does. We can also do that around corporate training materials. We can also do that around being able to do a particular action, like ask someone out on a date. So those are different levels at which we can dynamically create different learning paths based on what it is that a learner wants to achieve. That path could also be GCSE Spanish, I want to pass it. So we have created this flexible system that creates the learn section that you need in order to have the conversation or watch the film that you want to watch, or the conversation that you want to have, or whatever it is that you want to achieve. So at the moment, yes, we do. Yes, there are people in corporations using Memrise to learn English. However, we would very much like to do more of that and deepen those relationships. And so Daniel, Daniel, I'd love to hear more about what you see as the requirements there and how we could help improve that. Okay, so we are actually at time. I've got a few more minutes, but I don't know, people will presumably be dropping off around now. I don't know if Marcus, Myllis, if you've got a few more minutes to answer the rest of these.
So Kat's question, I think, is just a quick one. If you download the app Memrise from App Store, Play Store, etc., or if you go on the Memrise website, you can try out the Membot. If you just click on the communicate bit, then you can try it there.
Yeah, you can try that there, or you click on the Immerse to try it out there, to try out the Immerse part. Okay, like Marcus said, I'd like to know if and how will teachers be able to see all their students' responses in their interactions with the chat for assessment purposes? So I guess this is my question that I asked to Myllis, is how we can certainly do that, but I want to be sure that we build the right form of assessment there. Like, how important is it to be able to go through seeing all of the transcripts that your students have created? I mean, is that not just creating a huge amount of work for yourself? Would you rather get know that they've been doing it and know generally how they've been performing, or do you need to have that? Do you need to be able to check the homework yourself?
I wonder if you have almost two options. You have like a mock exam option, which you can do as a sort of a one-off where you might want to see it, so they can do an informal mock exam at home. But I think most of the time you're probably more likely to just want these, or maybe the response time, like the hesitation time. So maybe they get a flag, but they take a long time to give the responses, or they get maybe a flag for pronunciation, something like that, or maybe they get a flag for, I don't know, a particular type of error, so spelling, or I don't know, a particular type of verb ending, something like that. So something, I think you want two. I think you want one that's diagnostic, which is sort of more ongoing, maybe sort of like basic flags just to give you a sense of who's struggling. And I think again, like, it's often the engagement. So some who maybe keep switching out and coming back to it, time spent, that sort of thing. And I think you want a separate one that can, as a sort of a one-off one. Because most of the time, I don't think you would want the fine-grained information to check every single transcript, but maybe sometimes you would. Maybe worth having the option.
That's a great thought. Maribel, does that answer your question? I don't know if you're still here, but I'll assume it has. Shout out Stefano. I see an old Memrise team member from many years ago in the audience. Very cool to have you here, Stefano. Diana, not sure the focus has to be on right-wrong hint assessment. If you use a constructionist approach, which gives the student agency because they can see that the result of their action produced the wrong result, and they have to adapt, say, pronunciation until the bot understands it. And other examples, this would be naturally game-like and naturally use language as a tool to make you aware. I think what you're describing is exactly how it works. I'm not sure what the focus has to be on right-wrong hint assessment. That I 100% agree with what you said. I don't think the focus should be on. The way we have built it is based on the pedagogy that we believe that is, it's about making yourself understood, and that's how we drive motivation to get better, is because you want to be understood and complete the game, rather than you want to get it right so that you get a green tick and saying you're right. And I think those are really important distinctions. Like you acquire the ability to use the language because you are trying to communicate meaning and you've been successfully understood. And if you just get tested on, I got the translation right, then that is a drill that doesn't take you further towards practice. You really need to practice that. So I think I 100% agree with you, Diana. Great point. Maribel, can students practice with other students in the class, or are these activities meant to be done individually? So I think, Myllis, you had an idea for how this could be done as a collaborative piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably one of the best things about the Membot is that it makes conversation, which traditionally is a two-person activity that takes almost no time at all, into something that can be slowed down, deconstructed, and can be more considered. And I think that's where the group work element comes in, because you can have a couple of students working with one computer. And again, we said one-to-one devices. If you've got an iPad or a Chromebook or a laptop or something, then you can, the question comes up, they think about what they're going to say. They say, right, you're going to say it then, hit the microphone, someone speaks, and they go, oh, that wasn't what we expected. What are we going to say now? It's a bit more of a group activity, and it slows it down. So I think that's something that can be whole class. It can be the teacher putting it on the board, and as a class, you deciding what you're going to do. It can be pairs, it can be smaller groups. If you've got a particular text and you're cutting and pasting it in, you're asking questions about it, then it makes it's opened it up and it's slowed it down, because too much of oral conversation in class is often it's gone, they don't know what they said, they can't play things back. And this stretches out the time span of that activity, rather than it being just in the moment and the students baffled by you did that wrong, and then they've forgotten what they said anyway because they're too stressed out. So I think it really slows that down. It's a different way of being able to do speaking and listening practice that we've just not had before, because you can't put teacher on rewind, you can't put language on rewind. That's exactly what students need.
Yeah, and I would say it allows the teacher to be a lot more agile, giving agency to groups of children, individuals. Because we've all been there. I don't know if you've been in this situation. I think we all have as language teachers, where we've kind of taught something and said, right, now can you do your individual role plays?
Yeah.
And it's always a bit of a kind of 50% success rate, and you always kind of go, how can this be better? Well, I think Memrise allows for that here. Yeah.
And they also say often they then sometimes they infect each other with mistakes, whereas because one person said it's this and it might not be, and then suddenly you've got 4 or 5 people all saying the wrong thing. Whereas if you've got a member that said no, you need to say it like this, then they've got that correction, and because you can't be in all those different places at once. So that's a huge advantage of this, if you're going to do group work without the native level speaker, without the teacher or without the assistant there.
Yeah, I think actually another like thing that we could explore, not for school student communities, but we have also got a version of the Membot that you can use inside Discord servers where there is, and we have, because there's a huge amount of language learning going on in Discord servers, and there you can collaborate. So they actually, within a server, there is between server competitions to see who gets the most points. And within your server, you and your friends can all start a conversation with the Membot, and then you collaborate to answer. Anyone can answer. You get through the conversation. When you complete it, you win the points for your server. So that's another way we've been kind of experimenting with that. Although I think Discord's probably not for use in schools.
It's easy to see though how a different version of that could switch into, say, a Teams meeting in breakout rooms, something like that. I mean,
100%.
that's fantastic, you know, where you've got, again, a device in, say, each corner of the room with a few students around it, and they're each competing. Like that's the sort of thing that, again, that's
like competing between the different groups of students.
Something like that. So they've each got the same scenario. Whoever gets the bot to do what it needs to do, you know, first wins. Things like that, and they have to come up with the correct responses and things like that sort of thing. I can see it, you know, at my school. That would
where the tool, where the language becomes a tool to play a game, rather than doing the language being the thing that you're doing. It's like when the language is the end in itself, the motivations are hard to get right. You need to use that sort of gamification. Whereas,
and I can see how, you know, the classic one when you take students abroad is that they have to negotiate on a price for something, and they have to haggle, and they love that, you know, saying, "Oh, I got the best deal on this because I spoke French and I haggled for it." And something like that, little bits of competition where who can be most persuasive. That's the sort of thing that's a kind of game you've never been able to have in a language, because basically all the games that you have, all the sort of, you know, Kahoot style, sort of like a gamification of languages is based on individual little things. It's memory and recall, but this is a different kind of thinking, which would be really cool to have.
Amazing. I think we are. Are there any other? I think we've covered all the questions. Awesome. And I think we are now coming to the point where Zoom is going to kick us out. So thanks all so much for coming. Just one more shout out to sign up to that link on the Google Forms, because that's how going forward we will be emailing out to that group when we've got new things to test. It's also a group that anyone here can email to give suggestions, ask questions, and it's a direct line into our development team. So that'll be a kind of place where we can marshal all these discussions. And yeah, really, really looking forward to developing it with all of your help. Oh, there's one more one. How about creating a character as the chatbot? That'll be fun for our students. So we've discussed that a lot. There's a little robot that represents it, but the bot needs to be a different character in every situation. You know, sometimes it's a barista, sometimes it's an attractive man in a bar, sometimes it's a car salesman. It's all kinds of things. So although the sort of tech underneath it is represented by this cutesy robot, I think we need to give that freedom for it to be anything based on the situation. Anyway, thank you all very much, and particularly thank you, Myllis and Marcus, for your insights. It's been great to have you here and to have those insights brought into the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Take care. Bye, everyone.